we get started with today's episode, I would like to quickly read you our podcast disclaimer. This podcast is for educational purposes only, and it is not to substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. You should always speak with your physician or other healthcare professionals before doing any fasting, changing your diet in any way, taking or adjusting any medications or supplements, or adopting any treatment plan for a health problem. The use of any other products or services purchased by you as a result of this podcast does not create a healthcare provider-patient relationship between you and any of the experts affiliated with this podcast. Any information and statements regarding dietary supplements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. All right, and now we'll get started with today's episode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fasting Method podcast. I am here today with yet another amazing transformation. My client, Karen, has so generously and graciously agreed to join me here today. And even though I've had to reschedule her, I had some internet issues. So today we're praying to the internet gods that all of you are going to get to hear this story, this amazing transformation from this amazing person without too many glitches. So we're praying here. Without further ado, I would love to introduce you all to my client, Karen. Her and I have just actually finished not too long ago, a few weeks ago, we finished our coaching program together. And I can't quite remember, Karen, maybe you can, during the last session, which is really always a really important session. We review goals achieved, we review, future goals, what's working, what's not working, and things like that. At some point during that last conversation, even though we've had quite a few since then. But anyway, during that conversation, I can't quite remember if I'm the one that asked Karen to be here or if she suggested it. I have a feeling that I asked her. The last few transformations I've had on Karen have been people that have come to me and said, "Can I speak at your podcast?" But I'm pretty sure that I asked you. But anyway, please introduce yourself, Karen, properly. I've got a few questions here for you that I know our listeners would love to hear about your particular journey.
Thank you so much for this invitation. I'm honored. My name is Karen Ector. Hello, everyone out there in podcast world. Nadia, I think it was kind of a mutual conversation because I said, gee, I'd like to share some of this with my community. And you said, yeah, this is, sometimes we do podcasts or different things, or sometimes there's opportunities to share. So I think it just kind of came up naturally in our conversation, but I'm sure it was me egging you on to do it.
This time, I think it was me, but okay, I'll give it to you. I do think that you did mention that you wanted, now that you found this for yourself, that you wanted to be able to share and help others, which I think is awesome, because the reality is that that's what makes the world go round and these communities go round. It's the people that achieve their goals or are in the process of achieving their goals and then wanting to pass it forward. And it's quite interesting because a few weeks ago, Coach Terry and I recorded a podcast about why do some people manage to do this and others feel like that their desire to do it is just not enough. I don't know if you've had a chance to hear that podcast. It just came out not too long ago. And the title of it was Why Sometimes Desire is Not Enough. Like, why is it that sometimes people really want to do this, but they can't manage to do it? And so in that conversation, Terry and I mentioned a few things that I think are the things that I saw in you, Karen, that I would like to bring out and sort of share with people. But anyways, tell us a little bit more about yourself first, and then we'll talk about your journey here.
Oh, wow. What to tell about myself? I have grown children, and I'm in my 60s. And I don't know, I'm just at this part of life where I wanted to accomplish some of the things I put on hold because of mom, family, job, the whole bit. And that's a good segue into what you're saying. I don't think I could have, there's just a time where you really said, I really have to do this. And I'm sure it could happen for a number of reasons. For me, it was kind of a health journey that just really scared the bejesus out of me and said, okay, time to stop procrastinating, because you're almost fighting for your life at sometimes, when you're here. This is really about you're really fighting to save your life with how you are. And this was a lifesaver for me.
Wow, that's pretty emotional. Let's start there. Okay. In our program, we often ask people, like, what is your why? And Coach Terry talks about this. I'm going to mention Coach Terry quite a bit because we have obviously discovered that mindset, behavior, emotional changes, all of these components are really a big part of this journey. And so if we're just going to focus on the practical side of things, we just might not get there. Right. So my focus and my strength has always been, the science of it and the practical tips and tools. I've got all this huge toolbox full of things that, I've shared with you and I share with my clients. But I think that a big piece of my coaching journey has been learning from Coach Terry. So I'm going to mention her quite a bit. The community won't be surprised to hear that. And so one big thing in our community is that we always ask people, what is your why? What is, you have to have this great big motivating force behind what you're doing. And it's always very different for each person. And sometimes people struggle with having a why or finding a why. And sometimes it can be a short-term why. Like I work with a lot of people that are like, my son is getting married in 3 months. That's a huge why for people. And I think it's great. I think it's a great, and your why it can change, right? But you do have to have a strong why. You have to have a goal. You have to have something that you're looking forward to. You need that reward sort of thing. Coach Terry talked about this quite a bit. And sometimes if it's too far away, if it seems like it's too unattainable, that it might be challenging. So you kind of have to celebrate your victories along the way. So first of all, before I go off on a tangent, tell us your why. What was the thing that made you say, I need to do this, I want to do this, I'm going to do this?
The first, I think I might do it was the bathing suit syndrome. That's what I always say. I wanted to get back there. And so that's how it started. But the ultimate why became my health is at risk here. I was going along. Okay. I thought, okay, I'm a little overweight. I don't like what I'm seeing. But then the health markers came in. My mom died really young, younger than I am. She was 60. And I just remember seeing all these medications on her table and trying to talk her into trying something else. And I wasn't successful. And so when just to make a long story short, it was a doctor who said, you need to take this, your blood pressure's high, maybe there's some kidney issues. And it just kept going. And I said, well, what can I do to change all that before you write that prescription? Well, you got to lose some weight. And so I thought, well, then why aren't we talking about losing weight? And why are we talking about these pills? So that became a big motivator for me. I don't know, maybe because she was the way she presented herself, like, well, you're not going to do that, And I thought, well, I really could do that. I think maybe most of us out there have dieted. We've dieted before. We've gotten on that horse once or twice. We've made that commitment. Well, we fell off different reasons. But then I started thinking, this I can do. This is natural. This approach will work for me. And I'm gonna go full force. I set a date, which happened to be Lent because it was coming up. And I made a few commitments and I said, that's it. And of course, it wasn't just as easy as that, but that's what made me press the go button. And I'm still on the go button.
This is great because it's almost like you've set us up for sort of the coach that I want to become, the coach to kind of create that program that's going to work for everyone, even the people that don't come already prepared like you came, right? You came with all of these tools. You sort of had a why, right?
Yes.
And you made the commitments. I like lists. Everybody knows I like lists and I like to put everything in order. And you said something that's quite, I think, powerful, which is some people do really well when they're faced with a challenge.
Yes.
And so I think that maybe your physician said something like, oh, you should take these pills. And you said, well, why not lose weight? And she said, well, because you're never going to be able to do that. And women,
that's exactly what she said.
Women do not like to be told that they cannot do things.
Really? It was very matter of fact. Well, that's a lifestyle change. And actually she gave me 3 months and I came back and I lost 5 pounds. And she said, oh, that was such a great effort. Here's the pills. And I said, damn it, I've got to really put my mind to this. And I knew about our fasting approach and been rotating in my mind. And I thought, what does it say? Charlie Parker, now's the time. Now's the time.
Okay, that is hilarious because I think that this is sometimes what we need. And I joke, I'm being sort of sexist here, very generalizing that women don't like being told that they can't do things. I think that's a general thing about strong people. I think that people don't like to be told that they can't do things. And so that happened the one time, then you came back and lost the 5 pounds. She sort of laughed at you, and that nobody likes that for sure. And you said, "Oh yeah, let me show you." And so you mentioned something about you already knew of the fasting method. So how did you come across the fasting method?
I was thinking about that today. Like, how did it's been a long journey. I think gosh, I mean, I've been doing this, I've been involved for a long time, but I'm going to say this about maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, I somehow discovered Megan and I subscribed to, at the time, she was doing an audio course. And then I would listen to it. I would drive and I would listen to her in the car. And then periodically I would put it back on when I was close to doing that. But that fasting thing I was into keto. And it all started with low carb. I know everyone's had these journeys, and it worked, it really did. And then slowly I just gained the weight back. And I thought, no, I didn't do carb creep. I mean, what happened? And I know I was eating too much protein. And that's what really made me tune into her, because she really nailed, that is what made me gain this weight back, But it took me a long time to get back on the horse. And I just slowly just gained a little bit more over the years, and looked in the mirror. As a matter of fact, I used to avoid the mirror or windows or any type of reflective material, because just really didn't want to see what was on the other side. And but that was really the beginning, maybe the beginning was just, my mom. Just, I knew she actually went and had a stroke. She had a diabetic stroke, and she had a handful of grapes in her hand. And the sugar from the grapes, and her sugar was really, and that was it. We never saw her again. So I just remember these things in my mind, and I thought, this has to be the right lifestyle for me, because I have a propensity for that kind of, if it happened to her, it could probably happen to me. So I said, I really have to be proactive. You're dealt cards. This is the cards I have, and diabetes and high insulin are in those cards. So am I going to work with it, or am I going to work against it? I can't change the cards, but I can change how I play them. So that's what I'm going to do.
Well, first of all, I'm so sorry about that. It's always so painful to have to sort of relive and retell these stories. But this is part of our history, right? It's part of our story. It's part of our book. And the reality is, you've said so many things that have triggered so many thoughts in my head here. And one thing I want to say and remind ourselves and the people listening, our friends listening, is that I think it's Coach Larry that says this all the time. Genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. I think you are a prime example of that, Karen. What you're telling us is, and I am one of those people too, right? When I share my story, I always say, I have this genetic predisposition for this and that and that. And for that reason, I must change my lifestyle. It's more of a reason for me because I have these predisposition to these metabolic conditions, this insulin resistance. That's the reason why I must. And I think that imagery is really important for me. And I think that image that you just described of your mom holding those grapes, I think that's, that image is pretty powerful, right?
Yes, it is.
And I think that sticks with you probably. So that's a big part of your why for sure. So we've talked about the why. Somehow you came across our program, and I'm so glad that you did. You, like many of us, myself included, started in the low carb community, keto community. And like me, I felt that worked really well as well for me. But, there was a missing piece. And, for me, it's this big thing about TRE. And most people that come to us come from the low carb keto community. Mm-hmm. And their question is always, why isn't this working? And it does work, right? Low carb, I call it therapeutic eating. It does work, but you have to know how to eat as well. So I'm really glad that you found this. I know you put 2 and 2 together. So why coaching? That I don't know if I've ever, I'm sure I asked you that in our very first intake session, because that's a question that we ask, right? We say these are little questions during the intake session. Why coaching, right? Why do you feel like you need a coach? Why do you feel like you can't do this on your own? What's your healthy sense of urgency? Like, why now? And so you've told us quite a bit about that. We know why now. Your mother unfortunately passed away even younger than you are. And here you are, young and thriving, which if people could see you, we'll talk a little bit more about that in your bathing suit. What did you call it? Bathing suit syndrome?
Yes.
what is bathing suit syndrome? Like wanting to be in a bathing suit, but feeling like you can't?
Yes, it's just every summer, I live in the Northeast US, and we get the seasons, and every summer, you want to get in it, but when you get in it, you want to put that cover up on it and right on top of it. And it's like, darn, if I could just proudly walk on the beach. And I'm really not into revealing every single piece of my body on the beach, but just I want to at least look at myself and say, okay, you're okay in that suit versus why is that woman in that suit?
Our community is very body inclusive and there is zero body shaming here. And so it isn't about that. But I do talk quite a bit in my women's health groups. I do talk quite a bit about clothing and how clothing has this tremendous impact on ourselves, our self-esteem. And I think it's not just, I was talking about how it's not just people who identify as women. It's people in general. When a guy puts on something and he feels good, his confidence also changes. And I think that's a thing, right?
Yes.
It's pretty powerful. And so I just wanted you to know that I totally get that. And a lot of the people that I work with, this comes up all the time, and for a long time, what people end up doing when they're not feeling good about themselves, regardless of the weight or what the scale says, is they want to hide, right? They want to hide them. So you didn't want to look in the mirror. People want to hide. And that's just it's not a great way to live. So this brings up a few other things. So you found us. And then I was saying, okay, why coaching? So tell us that, because you're pretty strong and you seem like you would have done this on your own. But why did you choose to do coaching?
I tried, and I did. At one point, I did the low carb piece, as you said, and I lost weight, and it was great, and slowly gained it back. And I knew there was a missing piece. I'm not a medical practitioner. I read quite a bit, and I think most low carb folks are above average when it comes to trying to decipher medical information. We're pretty nerdy to get into this. So I don't know everything. And I said, this time I'm going to get a coach. And I'm so happy I found you. And I'm going to tell you why. And I strongly say this to everyone out there, because there's a part where how do I maintain this? I know what I know, but it's what I don't know that can sabotage me. It's with anything in planning. You can only plan what you can think of, but it's what you can't think of that you say, darn, I didn't think of that. I knew enough to know that there were some pieces that I just didn't know. And immediately when we started talking and you said TRE, I was one of those folks that thought, okay, when you're off your fasting, you can eat all day and you can eat what you want, or you can. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. You mean I can, you gave me the hours, the times, the plating, then it made perfect. And then you really nailed it. You said, this is a diet of insulin. This is about your insulin rising and falling. And whoa, that was the part that I didn't know. And that would have sabotaged me, right? That would come up again. Okay, you're here, but now why can't I maintain it? What's going wrong? Why is it coming back? So here we go again. We're back in that yo-yo piece. And I thought, I know I'm going to be calling on you again. I'm going to come back. I already know I have it in my mind. I'm going to get back on our coaching session again. It's not something you don't want to do every single day. You want to be able to maintain this on your own. But I think with any course or any program you follow in life, you have a mentor, you have people that guide your career. There's people that should guide your health, and you need to be in touch with that. And if you're serious about it, you're going to do what I do. You're going to save your pennies. And instead of, buying that suit, you're going to buy that coaching session, because that saves you. That's a lifesaver. That's a lifesaver. So I'm really glad I found you.
I really love that. One thing that I've been really working on as a coach is to remind people that we're here, right? This is, again, Coach Terry. We're here to do hard things.
Yes.
But you can do hard things. You do them all the time. And it's so much easier to do this together. So whether it's through a coach.
In the community, yes.
The community, right? I think that the really important thing here for me, and Terry and I talked about this in the last podcast that I mentioned, is that things work better when you do them in a step-by-step manner. People just kind of jump all over the place when it comes to diet and health and even fasting. And I think that our goal here is to explain to people, first of all, that this is a therapeutic approach to healing. Okay. The lifestyle and the longevity and the maintenance, that's something that you and I have worked on and is part of the steps, right? Eventually, how do you maintain? But there's an initial journey for most people that come in here, which is the reversal of a serious medical concern. So that's, it's giving this the importance that it deserves.
Yes.
Right? It's showing up. I've been saying this a lot. You guys know I'm a big fan of repetition. I'm going to keep saying this. This is a big goal of mine, is to remind people we are here to do serious things.
Yes.
We're here to do hard things. We got to show up for our therapy. It's going to be intense. It needs to be consistent. And this is one step that we sometimes miss. I still get a lot of messages. People will often say to me, even in the forum in our community, yesterday I answered a message about, something like this, like, oh, I really want to do this. I can do this and I can fast and I choose to eat better, but I also want to live life, as in like, I don't want to, when people ask me to go out, I don't want to have to say no. And it's like, okay, I get it, right? Like Karen, you wanted to live life, right? You want to have a life. You have a spouse, right? You have a husband who you guys travel a lot. I won't, you can share as much as you want, but I know that, your husband, because of his work, you guys do a lot of these fun things together. You travel, you go on cruises, you do all of these things. And so you want to live life. The reality is, if you choose to invest all this time, money into whether it's coaching program or doing this yourself, because as you said, knowledge is power. You don't know what you don't know, right?
Yes.
But if you learn, and that's what we're working on in the master classes, by the way, which are a lot more affordable. I know I love the master classes, but the idea is to create this step-by-step therapeutic plan so that people can do this, whether it's through coaching. It is what it is. Some people like the one-on-one. They like coming to somebody. They like the accountability. You can get the accountability from the community as well. There's many ways to get accountability, but you have to put this together in a step-by-step manner. You cannot skip steps.
Yes.
Therefore, this is a therapeutic approach. You wouldn't be getting your hair cut in somebody's backyard. Well, actually, I cut my kids' hair for the longest time. So, but I mean, like, eventually you want a professional to do it, right?
Exactly.
So you want to go to the right people. I hear people tell me all the time, oh, so-and-so tells me that fasting is bad for me, or my doctor said, and I say, well, but is that person a fasting expert? Has that person had fasting experience?
Right.
Or are they just reading things, from, go to the people that know what they're doing, That's why you're here, Karen, right? You're here to inspire people, to motivate people. I knew that people needed to hear your story. We work mostly with women still, even though there's loads of men in our community. But women often carry this like, oh, you can't lose weight after a certain age, or after menopause, it's harder. And then all of these things. Yes, you have grown children, which made this time, I guess, quote unquote, easier for you, possibly. But for example, you're postmenopausal. So some people would think that would be impossible.
Yes.
And you're still working. I know that for a fact, working hard. So it's not like it's this idea that I don't have time for this. I mean, it's just a lot of pieces that I don't want to say excuses, right? But we need to find the answers, the solutions, the how, as Terry says. So here's what Terry's list, and I want to ask you about this for you, okay? Because my question is, why do some people manage to do it and others feel like they can't do it? So Terry and I in the podcast talked about this. First, we agreed that it was the desire, making that commitment, saying, I want to do this, right? And not, I'm going to try to do it, or is saying, I want to do this, okay? Being convinced. And sometimes it just isn't, as you said at the beginning, it just isn't the right time for whatever reason.
That's right.
So in our intake session, besides asking you why coaching with me, I ask, what's your, why now, right? Why now? Are you ready?
That's right.
You need to be ready. Terry calls that I forget what the exact word that she used is, but there's a period of time where you're just, before you get to the decision.
That's right.
You go through this pre-period of everything, of just figuring this out. Take your time, guys, but really do
contemplating,
Yeah, pre-contemplating. That's exactly it. So deciding. We know you decided. The other thing that I didn't know, because my 3 steps to success were really simple. It was decide, create a plan, and then just do it. That was my 3. I probably said that to you at the beginning. Now it's a much bigger list, right? Now it's, okay, deciding. We need to get to that, right?
Yes.
Second, Terry explained to us, is our belief system. We need to believe in this. We need to believe that this is going to happen. We need to work on our limiting beliefs. There's a lot of limiting beliefs. For example, your doctor saying to you, oh, forget it, you're not going to lose weight.
Yes.
That's a big limiting belief that we need to overcome, right? There's so many. Sometimes it's, well, within my family, everybody, Terry used this example, within my family, everybody's overweight. Therefore, it's my genetics.
Here we go. That's right.
Again, genetics loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. You get to decide what your expression of those genetics is, right? That's different.
That's right.
And so the belief system is huge. And so Terry talks about how this is the part where we need to work on. This is what we can do together, or you can do on your own with the right resources, is how do you work on, okay, how am I going to do this? Not I can't do this, or nobody can do this, or postmenopausal women can't lose weight. How am I going to do this? What is the right how, right? This is very important. Working on your limiting beliefs, working on a fixed mindset, getting to a growth mindset, knowing that you can change, that you can evolve. And Terry shared a lot of resources on this. So I wanted to hear a bit from you about this. What did you do? Or what was some of your maybe limiting beliefs, and how did you overcome this? Because we're trying to find the secret here. We're trying to get your secret for everybody else, right? Like, we know you made a decision. Yeah, it is. We know you made a decision, but what was like, how did you overcome those limiting beliefs and saying to yourself, how can I do this? How did you get there?
I want to say two things. You said something at the doctor. You know, doctors, they're very intimidating. So to all our folks out there, that when you have a physician tell you, take this pill or do this, or you have this condition, you are now a blah, blah, blah. And you're thinking to yourself, no, I'm going to do something else. You know, pat yourself on the back, because it takes lots of courage, because these are the folks that spend their lifetime learning about whatever they're supposed to know. And they're the experts. And you feel this big, a little tiny imp, and they just tell you what to do. So, I remember crying in the car, because I was just so broken after that. And I thought, oh man, my doctor she just hurt my heart. So, and maybe in her defense, she's trying to save my life. So she was really telling me, this is what you need to do. And so for me to say, I can't do that. I have to do it was really difficult. So I think to all of our folks out there, that's a real reality. And, be proud that you thinking that you're going to try, or at least give yourself a chance to try something else. But the how, it was, I remember going back to school at 50 something, and I had, 2 kids, a husband, 2 jobs. I still do. And I try to think, well, when can I put this in? Where is it? There's got to be a hole somewhere, so you wind up, I would get up this time in the morning at 6 something, and I would study before they got up so that I could get them to school. And I would take my books with me wherever I went, because no matter where you are on your job, there's always a lapse. And then I'd whip it out and I'd study and so I think you have to really decide and look at your schedule, because no is really not an option at that point. When you make that decision, it's not going to be no, it's going to be, how am I going to make this happen? What am I going to do to make this happen? And we know lots of women, but we're pretty tough, and we can make all kinds of things happen. How many times have you juggled 3 kids in a car, in a school bus, soccer, you name it. Husband cook, and I cook and I fast while I'm cooking, because he's not fasting. He does a little bit. He tends to look at me and go, well, here, let me try that. But that I can't tell you how many meals I've had to cook and say, there you go. And then I sit down with a cup of tea, and I'm thinking in my head, I know I have to do this. So how am I going to do it? And I don't want to break our family apart. You pick and choose your battles. If food is a big thing for he's 6, 5, 7, he eats, I tell him, he's like breastfeeding. He eats every 2 hours. So he's like, and I was getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So how am I going to do this? So it's unique. And that's what something that you guys said to us, this is your journey. You can create this schedule or design this to fit your lifestyle. And it's really going to look different for everyone. Well, what kind of diet does that? To your young woman that said, or a friend that said, I want to have fun. I go out with my girlfriends. I went to St. Martin with 4 high school girlfriends at 65 that we went bonkers. We had fun. But there were times I was drinking sparkling water and I had just as much fun. I figured out when I could drink and when I couldn't, or when I could, and I just kept that. But it was okay, because I knew at some point I was going to do that. but I had it on my schedule. And as long as I kept my schedule, I said, well, I'm all right. I'm okay. But, it doesn't stop anything. Fun is fun. I'm there. I'm going to show up. I'm still going. I'll let you know how I make it up, but I don't think that that's everything. That food, it dictates, but we can control it. That's what I like about this regimen. I mean, it's mine. It's mine, and I can look at it each week and say, okay, this is something I need to do this week. So I'm going to flip this here and there and stay with it. There's a few things in life you can control like that, but this is one thing you can control. That's why you can do this. That's how you do it. I really mean that sincerely.
Okay, I promise you guys that Karen and I did not rehearse this. I did not.
No.
Because Terry and I just recorded this podcast not too long ago. It just came out. You and I wouldn't have even had an opportunity to talk about this. But when I was planning sort of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, I thought I have to ask Karen, just based on what I had gathered from you, that these are the things that you figured out along the way, and that I want people to have the opportunity to hear and realize that they too can figure this out. And so when I was talking to Terry and listening to the podcast yesterday again, when I was talking to her about, okay, the decision and then the belief system and the how, I thought of you. How did you make this work, and what can we share with people so that they too can realize, yes, it's hard. We're here to do hard things, but you too can do this, right? And again, I want to reiterate, repetition, guys, we are talking about a therapeutic journey. We're talking about going to therapy for 3 to 6 months, showing up for your health and for yourself for 3 to 6 months with therapeutic fasting and therapeutic eating. We're not talking about the lifestyle, the long-term thing. We will work on that. You will work on that once you figure out TRE and plating and all these other things, right? We are talking about what you need to do during a very important time of your life, which is this healing phase of your journey, this is what's going to give you the health
exactly
to enjoy the rest of your life. Okay. The third thing that Terry brought up, and I'm wondering your thoughts on this. So first was decide, right? Making a commitment. The second was your belief system and, how am I going to do this? Believing. And then the third was your confidence. She said, this is a big part. And I hadn't even thought about that. In order for people to be able to do this, right? To show up to their healing and to consistently keep doing it and to keep showing up, they must have the confidence that they can do this. And so this is what she shared with us. She said that one of the things that helps, in that all the books that talk about change and being able to actually achieve change and growth and evolution and all these things that people want, they mention celebrating every step of the way, not waiting to celebrate the 50 pounds, the 100 pounds.
That's right.
That just seems too far away and too unattainable. It's this ability to learn how to celebrate yourself and how to celebrate each step. And that builds your confidence to take that extra step and to just keep going and eventually to get to where you want. And I think that's a big piece that I didn't realize in people like you that have gone through it may have realized, maybe not, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this third piece, which is, how did you find the confidence, build the confidence to keep going and to get to where you got?
She's amazing. I never even considered that, all these things, but you're right. It's, wow, now you're making me think. So a couple of things. I think educating yourself, reading. I think our community, like I said, we're a bit, for lack of a better word, but a little nerdier. We like to go a little deeper than average. And I think, reading and educating yourself helps you a bit with your confidence because, you're kind of like fighting. You're not in a battle, but it is a battle, right? You go into work and, I'm watching people graze all day. And I heard someone say, oh, if you're hungry, you should eat, and I'm thinking to myself, but you're not really hungry. You're just in the habit of eating. But how did I know that? Okay, I'm reading. There's a link to something else. So, I think putting that in your head, feeding yourself, I say education is king, or it's real, because then you can have conversations with yourself and make yourself understand. And that makes you a little bit more confident about not going to eat that. And I know why, because I know this is going to make my insulin go, so you have these things and you can almost rattle it off because, so that helps. I think we're in a whole new world of, when I started this, we didn't have all these kind of electronic scales. And I remember years ago, I think it was Jimmy Moore. Remember that? He said, well, if you could these big DEXA scans, which were fully beyond my reach because that would have paid my rent for a month, And I thought, wow, wish I had money to do these things. And you needed money to do these things. Now you have electronics and things that are at your disposal. I mean, I used a fit index scale that measures your body composition and weight and things. And I'm sure it's not as accurate as maybe the doctor, but I was reading and they said, but it's consistent. So that consistency helps with that achievable goal. So you can measure those little milestones. And I mean, it would say, you lost minus 4 points of fat. Yes, yay. And I would think, yay, so I wanted my body to eat the fat that was on it, and I said, I don't want to lose weight. I just want to train my body to use the excess energy that I have. I wanted to go in my hips. I'm trying to talk to my body. Go in the hips, take some of that, I could feed a city right now, like this. And my dad used to say, she's not missing any meals. So those things, those little milestones, they add up. I didn't gain weight overnight, and I'm just not going to lose it overnight. So I got to be a little patient with myself. Maybe it's not on the scale, but my pants are a little looser. There's other ways to measure. I think the idea is to be positive. Just not look at the half empty, look at it half full. Oh, I only lost 5 pounds. Oh, I lost 5 pounds. That could be, and your body has to do its thing. I just think if you just stay with, I know we can do it. You can stay with it because your life depends on it now. I mean, at 65, the rest of my life depends on what I do right now. This is way past the bathing suit phase. Now it's, can I get out of a car? Can I still walk? I want to make sure that the second journey is quality. And I think we all know folks that are alive, but are not living, or their quality of life is not there. And, that's such a disservice. We're giving these beautiful fountains, these instruments, that we've given this beautiful thing. We have it. Let's use it to the best we can. That's all. We're not going to be here forever. Let's use it to the best we can. So it's a different journey now. I hope that anyone that's my age or more that can see that this is not the end. This is a new start. 60 is the new 50. Shoot.
Oh, it certainly is. Look at you. I love it. Okay. Well, I feel like we could stop here, except I have more questions. But wouldn't it be great if we just stopped here? Like, wow, that was powerful, because this is it, right? So celebrating the small steps. I also have one of these scales that you were talking about. I have a Renfo scale. I often talk about this. It's now super cheap to get a Renfo. By the way, guys, make no money off a Renfo. I've had other scales. The reason why I ended up switching to a Renfo was because so many people in our community were using it. I needed to speak the same language, right? When they were talking about the metabolic age that it said, or when they was talking about the visceral fat range, I needed to understand it. I ended up getting the Renfo, and I really like it. And it's funny because I'm not one of those people that's hooked on a scale, because I didn't grow up with weight issues. So a scale, really, I even forget that it exists sometimes, except I use it as a tool to help me figure out certain things. I particularly like these body composition scales because I am not so stuck on weight.
Yes.
Like you were talking about. I am focused on body composition. I like to know what my visceral fat is, because I know that and I do think these are very accurate, by the way, because I have had DEXA scans done, even though they were super expensive before. Karen, you can now get a DEXA scan done for like $20 at a university. I mean, they do become a lot more affordable, unless you live in Portugal. I live in Portugal, right, Karen?
Yes.
When we first got here, my husband and I went searching for a DEXA scan because I thought it was time for me to redo a DEXA scan, and found out that the only place that had a DEXA scan was at the Benfica Football Club. So the only people that got to get a DEXA scan done were the professional soccer players. So anyway, none of that going on in Portugal. I guess the nearest one to us was like in the UK or whatnot. But anyway, the Renfo really helped. It cost me $20 or something like that.
Wow.
Got it on Amazon the next day. A lot of people in our community talk about this. I'm sure there's better, worse. I don't know. It is quite accurate. We've had some lemons. Some people have complained about it being off from the DEXA scan, but most of the time people think it's pretty consistent.
Yes.
It gives me a really good idea of my visceral fat, which is what I'm concerned about, the fat on my organs.
Yes.
So over the summer, I'm going to be totally honest with you guys, over the summer, because of life, right? You even said this to me yesterday, life gets in the way. Yes, life gets in the way. I was very aware of the choices I was making and the things that I was doing.
Right.
Wasn't making up excuses, but came September and I thought, September for me is a very powerful month. It's a time of change. It's a time of, change of season. I think you're physically and emotionally very ready to make changes. Kids go back to school. Some people go back to work, whatever, routine. I love routine. And so I pulled out, I hadn't used the Renfo in quite a long time, that it was full of dust. And because it's these digital things now, electric, all of these, you actually have to plug it in to charge it like a phone. So it was out of battery. Couldn't use it. I was pretty frustrated. I was pretty frustrated the first day. Couldn't use it. Had to charge it. But anyway, and so I wish our friends listening could see this. I know that they can't, but you can, Karen. It's funny because you can see, and so you won't let me lie, but this is you see that? It's I always say nobody's weight loss journey is linear, yet my Renfo is really liking me. Since I started over here in September, it's such a linear line down.
Look at that.
Because, I'm not perfect, but I've had the opportunity to sort of learn from all of you guys and my colleagues. We can put this in a step-by-step pattern anytime, even if it's just post-summer or whatever that post-summer gain.
That's right.
You can put this together and sort of, it's been, my kids had the stomach flu in the meantime. I think I told you that, right, Karen?
No.
For like almost a week now. And still, I'm still on. I haven't been sleeping all that great because she hasn't been doing great. But, life is not easy. This is not easy. But for me right now, I'm looking at this phase as my therapeutic phase,
Yes.
And so that might just be a short 1 month therapeutic phase, but I show up to my therapy. I take it very, very seriously. I know there's other things in life and I celebrate. So the reason why I even step on the scale is because I like to celebrate that. And it's already gone down 2 points, my visceral fat. So,
wow,
which is amazing.
That's amazing.
Right? Because that's where I gain, right? I mean, you saw that the drop is in grams, like it's tiny little drops along the way, right? But it's pretty linear, surprisingly, considering I'm a cyclical woman, right? It shouldn't be that linear. It probably will change at some phase of the month if people understand what I'm talking about. But these things help us to celebrate, right? They help us. I don't particularly think that everybody should get on the scale. I think a lot of people have a very unhealthy relationship with the scale, but there are many other ways for you to measure your progress and for you to celebrate your victories, right?
That's right.
Measuring your waist circumference, I think, is a big one.
It's huge.
I think that's probably the only thing that people should do consistently, right? Even that changes and fluctuates, right? If you're more bloated, less bloated, and that's okay. So I do teach people sort of how to create like a more consistent measuring plan. So coming up to my next question for you. So to finish off this list, right? Deciding, believing, having the confidence, and then it's creating a plan. And then the last one is executing that plan. So let's talk about these two, okay? So tell the people listening. So what was the plan? What did you do? Karen, we haven't talked about what you did or what you achieved, and we don't have to. But just to finish off, maybe you can tell people listening in, what did you, Karen, a postmenopausal 60-something-year-old busy woman, what was your plan?
The plan was, after reading, I knew that, eat 4 days or fast 3 days or fast 4 days and eat 3 days. So, and I looked at my schedule. My husband's a musician, so I knew, I said, a couple nights a week or one night a week, we might be moving around. So I tried to make my schedule where I could put that fasting within, and then I could have some of the weekend, not the whole weekend, but a good part of the weekend where I could do my TRE, and then Sunday night flip right back into and I use work. I mean, like I said, I'm still working. So I remember thinking, if I'm busy at work, I'm going to just keep going, and I remember Dr. Fong saying, it's that your hunger is like a wave, it goes up and it comes down. And if you just ride it out, it's going to be okay. So all these things were in my head, and I thought I should be really happy when I'm hungry, because that means my body is like, what? You're not eating? Oh, well, let me go downstairs and have storage and grab some. So I'm like, yes, my body's burning that storage fat. So I would just psychologically try to turn that around. I'm like, yeah, you think you're hungry, but what's really and then I remember being pregnant. I just say this really fast. And I was sick most of the time, but the baby came out perfectly. And I had her at 40 and at 45. So I had my kids lead. And I lost all kinds of things because I wasn't eating, but my body was eating, and my body was protecting that baby. Your body is going to eat. So I thought, don't get it twisted. If your body's hungry, it's going to go to wherever it needs to go. It's going to survive. And it's you're not starving yourself. We're so not there yet. I'm not underweight. And so these things were really part of the plan to think of, I'm going to stay with this schedule, because I've been listening to you guys forever. She's sometimes doing 2 back to back, really, really goes in. And I thought, if I do Wednesday and Thursday, then I can maybe do my TRE on Friday. And if I'm going out on Saturday, I have that. So I really had to plan. It took time to plan it. But once I did, it works. Everybody's mostly happy, but I'm the happiest because I don't feel as bad walking past the mirror. And my blood pressure really took a plummet, and all the other markers are there. I do have a physician that subscribes to low carb. He actually knows Dr. Fung, and he's never given me a pill. What are you eating? And when I go to him, he takes 10 vials of blood. But he says something to me. He said, I forget one marker, but he looked at me and he said, there's no pill on the planet that could have changed this health marker right here. I forget which one it was. He says, there is no pill. He said, so I know you're not cheating, because here it is. And I thought, wow, this is real. This is it. So lifetime. Life changes while change the fast. Vacation comes up, which they do, we change it fast. So we go into, like, you gave me a lot of information about what to eat, or, about fat fast, how to maintain, which is virtually a fast, but while you're eating. So if I go on a cruise, I'm going to be in the bacon line, or I'm going to be around there where the skin is, and this is fun stuff. It's really good stuff. And you share it with people, because they do ask you, what did you do? Okay. If you're willing to listen, I'll tell you. Maybe you change someone, or you give them a little confidence. And that's what we're like, little angels sometimes, right? You're the angel, or sometimes there's an angel for you. But I think that's how we make it.
Karen, you are amazing. That's pretty powerful, what your doctor said to you. But this last piece that you just told everyone, I think we're going to end it there. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your story. I feel like there's so much more I could ask you, but you have given us plenty, enough, and so much. Thank you for everything. It has been an immense pleasure. I think you know this. I've told you privately, but it has been an immense pleasure to work and learn from you.
Oh, learn from you. You're amazing. Coach Nadia is, I don't know how to say this, but anytime I refer anyone that said they're interested in fasting, I tell them, you have to go to the fasting group. This is where you want to go. This is the right place to be. It's just, this is it. I know it. And so thank you. And I'll be back because I still need you. So please, this is the tip. And I want this to be the way it is for the rest of my life. And so I will always have this communication. I'm not going to leave myself out there. No.
And we need you in our community. So please don't go anywhere. Okay. We have plenty of people in our community that have chosen to stick around during their maintenance longevity journey.
I'm going to be that.
People need to learn from you. People need to be motivated and inspired by you, and you yourself, even for your own motivation to stick to plan. It's really important that you get the accountability and support that you need from that.
Right.
And there's enough of a growing community to do that. So thank you again, Karen. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Coach Nadia,
for listening. Have a great rest of the day. Have a great week, everyone. And happy fasting. We'll see you again next week. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, guys.